Hello and welcome. This is the live broadcast. I am Bill. I'm going to be your presenter now for the next half an hour. We are about to begin the live discussions. Don't go anywhere because the discussions are about to begin. First of all, though, we must open the show with a little bit of inspirational music. But before we do that, what I want to bring your attention to is what we're going to be talking about this evening. Because this evening, what we are going to be talking about is, again, the European referendum. We are going to be talking about the European Union. But most importantly, the element of the European Union we're going to be talking about are the ministers themselves. Okay, so if you are interested in what the ministers have to say, if you want to know more about the ministers, I'm going to try and draw that attention. I'm going to try and draw that opinion to you. So we are going to be beginning. We are going to be sending some clear, sharp messages out there about the European Union tonight. Well, hopefully you are. After all, this show is all about you, and only you can make this work. So if you're listening to this right now, then what I would encourage you to do is comment using the comment section just to your right hand side, or send me a tweet at Bill_predict. That's at Bill_predict, and send me a tweet on Twitter to let me know what you think about the ministers in the European referendum campaign. Now, we're talking specifically, it doesn't mean we have to talk about this, but we are going to be talking specifically about those that are for leaving the European Union. After all, that's what my talk show is all about. We're all about leaving the European Union. You know, I don't talk about staying in because that's not an option to me. We need to leave the European Union. So that's what we're going to be looking at. However, if you have an interesting point you want to bring across about some pro-European members of Parliament, let's give you John McDonnell, the shadow Labour Chancellor, or the shadow leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, for example. If you want to talk about those figures, and please do feel free to do that, because they're two very interesting figures in politics, and that's one of the subjects I would like to talk about in this evening's discussions. Because believe it or not, Jeremy Corbyn and Jim McDonnell, for that matter, did come out for many, many years as seeming to be Eurosceptic. So let me know what you think on that subject. And first of all, I just want to say to you, if I sound like I'm holding my nose as I'm talking, I'm actually not. I've got a bit of a stuffed up nose, but other than that, I'm absolutely fine. So don't worry, I've not brought myself a new voice. It just sounds a little bit funny because I've recovered from a cold. But anyway, enough about me. We're going to be launching the show in just a moment. We're going to wait for some more people to come into the room. But before we do that, we're going to start the music, and we will be back in about 3 minutes' time to start the discussions. As I said, use the comment section to your right and contact me via Twitter at Bill_predict. Thank you very much. With a little bit to your right. know what? There's always an awkward moment, isn't there, when you think the music is going to go on for a little bit longer than expected, and you're halfway through having a Malteser chocolate bar. Well, there you go. That's why there was a slight delay, because for medicinal purposes, I was trying to have a Malteser chocolate bar. I don't know if I'm even allowed to say that over the air, am I? Will I get told off for copyright if I say the word Malteser? Product placement and all of that. I'll forget all of that, shall we? It was a Malteser's teaser I had, and I must admit it was rather nice, but unfortunately there's no more left now. But anyway, let's begin the discussions, because I'd imagine that those of you that have just arrived into the room, and I've noticed we've got quite a high figure count coming in now. It's going up and down, you know, but I've noticed that a lot of people like to listen to the playback of this. So as you will notice on my video page, there will be hundreds of views, and you're probably thinking, hang on a second, why on earth are there hundreds of views? There's only 5 people listening live in the room. Well, that's because a lot of people don't necessarily have the time to sit down and watch these discussions, or should I say listen to them. So a lot of people like to listen to them on playback, and I am thinking of actually going towards that direction. I'm thinking of having like a midweek live discussion like this one, but then actually having a Sunday video release broadcast, because Sunday's a really good day to reflect on the week, especially in politics. That's why you've got the Sunday politics. That's why you've got the Andrew Marr show on a Sunday. That's why you've got the Big Talk. All of the popular political shows are always on a Sunday, and that's because you can reflect on the week. So let me know what you think of that, because that'll be some good feedback. This is definitely not going anywhere, because there's nothing like talking live in the room. There's nothing like this unique connection whereby you can talk live to your audience, and it's great to see more people are coming into the room. So welcome. We are talking about Brexit. This is what this channel is all about, and what we are going to be talking about right now is the European Union and ministers. Last week, or should I say this week, I can't believe it, we're on the last day of the week already, it was released in the press that ministers proposing to leave the European Union are going to be banned from being able to receive help from senior civil servants, from mandarins as we know them. I want to know what you think, so use the comments section to your right. This can only work with you. There will be no discussions. And I know you're probably eagerly typing away on your keyboard, in which case take your time, and please be assured that I'm very grateful for your investment in this discussion. Because if you make an investment, if you discuss in the comments section to your right, or by sending me a tweet on Twitter, that's at Bill_predict, the discussions will really get underway. They really will. If you discuss, if you get talking, if you give me your opinions, then we will be able to talk about many, many different things. But this discussion, this debate can only happen with you. So comment in the section to your right. And in the meantime, I'm going to give you my opinion, because more and more as the days go by, as we get closer and closer to the European referendum, I can see those that are proposing to be in getting scared, more and more scared. Now, when those that oppose the unstatus quo, let's put it in more simpler terms, when we've got people in politics that oppose people going against the grain, they really do start to get uncomfortable and they shake around. It's almost as if the suit that they're wearing has got itching powder in. They get so uncomfortable when people go against the grain. Look at Jeremy Corbyn, for example. The whole of the front bench row, I mean, I can't keep up from it from one day to the next, if I'm absolutely honest with you. I mean, one minute, you know, you've got Jeremy Corbyn as the leader and Angela Merkel as the defence secretary, or it's Hilary Benn, should I say, the shadow defence secretary. And then the next minute, you know, is he staying, is he going? Angela Merkel was moved, not Angela Merkel, sorry, Angela Eagle, easy one to make there. Angela Eagle is moved from one ministerial position, or should I say shadow ministerial position, to another. And you know what? It's a really foul play, isn't it? Those in politics that don't like going, or should I say supporting anything other than the status quo, seem to get ants in their pants every time anyone comes along and decides to oppose the bloody thing. And that's exactly what's happening with the European Union. I mean, for some reason, if you do not believe in the European Union and you want to vote to leave, you're somehow some sort of allergic reaction or germ. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Let me know what you think. Send me a comment, because I know there are people in this room that are eager to tell me what they think. So let me know. Let me know what you think about this. If you're watching via the change.org website, then it might be worth clicking directly on the YouTube video and viewing this in YouTube. Because if you do that, then what you will be able to do is actually comment live rather than just listening. So let me know what you think. I mean, quite frankly, I think it's ridiculous that ministers are being stopped, are being gagged, or should I say their mandarins, their workers are being gagged. So let's say Ian Duncan Smith wants to do some research into the European Union, and he's asking his senior civil servant in the Work and Pensions Office. Well, as things stand, would I like to tell you I would, as things stand, Ian Duncan Smith will be on his own. And it's absolutely ridiculous to think that senior civil servants within the Secretary of State offices are going to be banned from being able to help those that go against the grain. I mean, it's all for one and one for all, isn't it? It's absolutely ridiculous. There is no division whatsoever, and quite frankly, I think it's an absolute disgrace. Now, you know what this says to me? In a way, it's quite a good thing, because what it says to me is that David Cameron is losing. Because desperate times, desperate measures. Hey, listeners. I mean, you know, if you are getting desperate, if you are desperate for something, you will go all out, won't you? If you are desperate to get that car that you have wanted since you were 5 years old, you will work every single hour God sends to buy that car, won't you? If you want that house, you will work every single hour and save every single penny to get that deposit you need. And you know what? That's what David Cameron's doing, isn't he? David Cameron is going all out because he's a greedy so-and-so and is only interested in himself. Let me know what you think. Do you think David Cameron is a greedy so-and-so? Send me a comment on the right-hand side, or send me a tweet at Bill Predict. We are talking about all for one and one for all, but we're also talking about the fact that ministers are being gagged, essentially, from being able to receive help from their senior civil servant. So we're talking about the mandarins, for those of you that are really into your politics. Let me know what you think. Send me a comment. I know you're absolutely sitting there waiting to send me your comments. And remember that this discussion cannot begin without you. Otherwise, I'm just going to be talking to myself, and quite frankly, I do like doing that, but you know, not for long periods of time in one day. So, you know, someone's got to break the mold here. Someone's got to send something and really get the discussion rolling, because that's generally what tends to happen. One person has such a great opinion, and then it just snowballs into something completely different. And that's what's great about this show. This is all about you. So let me know what you think. Send me a comment on the right-hand side, or send me a tweet at, that's the @ sign, Bill, BILL underscore predict, PREDICT. Send me a tweet, send me a comment. This is entirely down to you. But whatever way you want to go, we need discussions. And you know what? We are going to be beginning those very, very soon. Okay, well, it looks as though people are still typing. So in which case, we will continue. Thank you very much. If you are typing away, then thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. This is all about you. This cannot go anywhere without you. Of course, I can't beg you. I don't go around like David Cameron begging for comments. That's not what I'm going to do. But if you don't comment, there will be no discussion. And then this will be this will not be a resourceful experience. So anyway, we're going to go into the economy. That's what we're going to be talking about. We are talking about ministers, we are talking about the ministers, but we're going to talk specifically about one minister, George Osborne. As most say, the second most powerful man in the country. Or should we say the unofficial Prime Minister? Because let's face it, Chancellor of the Exchequers aren't just that, aren't they? They tell the government what to do and they expect everyone to listen, shake their heads, and say yes. Well, if I'm quite frank with you, I actually like George Osborne. And I know that's probably going to be an unpopular statement, but I actually do like George Osborne, and I will probably lose viewerage count for saying that. But if I'm absolutely honest with you, I really do feel that out of all of the politicians, despite the fact that you may not agree or disagree with the Conservatives, Labour, or the Lib Dem, George Osborne sticks to his guns. You know, let's face it here. George Osborne has an opinion and he keeps it. I've never known George Osborne to go back on an opinion. Yes, okay, you know, his proposals, his plans, his targets are constantly rolled forward, but he nevertheless tries his best to achieve them. And I think that is very, very important that a politician does that. So I'm actually a big fan of Mr. Osborne. But one thing I think is really important to note is the fear and the scaremongering coming from the likes of George Osborne, saying that the economy will be in tatters if we leave the European Union, that the fact that the dollar is going up against the pound is an absolute travesty, and we should be shaking in our boots over the whole thing, are all statements, are all comments, are all suggestions or implements, should I say, that actually are false. There will be a bit of uncertainty, but you know what? There was as the general election was approaching just last May. So just because the dollar is going up against the pound, it doesn't mean we're going to be in another financial crash of 2008. It doesn't mean that there's going to be another global crash. It doesn't mean that the banks are going to suddenly collapse. It simply means that the value of a pound in another country isn't going to be worth as much. I mean, what a big deal. Seriously, come on. You know, is it really that much of a problem? I mean, if you're an experienced economist, let me know. Is it really that much of a problem? The fact that the dollar is going up against the pound? I mean, come on. Come on, are you being serious? Is that really the pinnacle of the whole situation? Is that really going to be responsible for the crash should we decide to leave the European Union? If I'm absolutely honest with you, what the press need to do is start being honest, because this isn't anything to do with leaving the European Union, as the press would love you to think. What this is all about is the uncertainty around a yes or no vote. It's got nothing to do with a decision. Once the decision has been made, it's set in stone. But let's weigh this up as a perspective, shall we? As soon as we leave the European Union, we'll be saving £55 million a day. So I'm sure that will more than make up for the perhaps slight adjustment in dollarage to pound, should there even be an increase. And that should. What if, what if Tony Blair walks in my living room and makes me a cup of tea? What if, what if David Cameron, comes over to my part of the country and decides to do a talk on the European referendum? What if? It's all what if, and I think these ministers really need to grow up. Anyway, let's look at your comments, because the comments are coming in thick and fast, and you know what? We are getting a bit of discussion here. This is meant to be risky. Or this is meant to get you involved. Send me a comment. It's great to see that Chris Tressy has commented, how are we going to get the fishing licenses back from the Dutch, French and Spanish? In the 80s, I was in the Navy and visited the States when the GBP was on parity with the dollar. We survived. There you go. That was in the 80s. That was in the 80s, Chris. And by the way, thank you very much for your question regarding the fisheries, because I think this is a really important one to discuss. And we talked about this last week, actually. Now, with regards to getting the fishing licenses back, the Dutch, the French, and the Spanish are all within the European Union. Okay, so we are part of the club. Now, if we decide to leave the club, right, they can no longer be part of us. So imagine it a little bit like being I suppose the best way to look at it is a little bit like a foster family, isn't it? Really, I think that's the best way to look at the European Union. A very good way of looking at it if we want to do it in an analogy. Now, basically, to cut a long story short, Chris, the European Union is a little bit like our foster family. So, let's say Dutch, the French, and the Spanish are our foster sisters and brothers. Well, we are essentially in their foster family, and we can receive all the benefits of being within that family. Going on holiday, for example, which is a very good one. We can go to them, they can come to us. Freedom of movement, being able to trade without any penalties, being able to come over to each other's houses without having to, show our passports or anything else like that. Although I know we need to, technically we can just pass through the borders as we like, which a lot of people have already said is a big problem, uncontrolled immigration. But that's another discussion. So essentially, the Dutch, the French, and the Spanish are our foster family. And obviously, what we've got to remember is this. If we were to leave that foster family, if we were to say bye bye, au revoir, adios, then they would no longer be able to use our sea. They'd no longer be able to use our fishing seas in order to fish. So that's exactly what would happen. That's exactly how we would get back their fishing licenses. In fact, we wouldn't even have to get them back. They would expire as soon as we were to leave the European Union. So this is a good example. This is a good springboard onto the whole whirlwind around power. There is no power in the United Kingdom at the moment. Sovereignty is just a nice, crisp, golden word that's currently locked up in a jury box somewhere. And the only way we're going to be able to open that word and use it proudly for our country is if we leave the European Union. Anyway, thank you very much for that, Chris. I hope that gave you some clarity. I know we've got quite a lot of comments here. And Andy, very nice to see your comments as well. You've got very spiced up, haven't you, about this whole discussion? They have taken all of our fish. Then we get 200 miles back. Absolutely, Andy. All round our coast. However, you disagree with me on the holidays. Well, you know what? I do agree with you on that one. I was wrong to give holidays as an example, but what I was trying to say, maybe I didn't make it clear enough, Andy, but what I was trying to say is we can go on holiday to Spain and France without being challenged in any way, shape, or form. So, because there's an open border policy, that means we can literally hop over without being questioned on it. Whereas if you were to try and go to Australia, you'd probably be asked every question under the sun. What's your mother's maiden name? When was the last time you used Facebook? Are you a Eurosceptic? Do you like to eat fish and chips, or do you prefer your Sunday roast with a bit of gravy? Are you a vegetarian? Whereas if you go to Spain or if you go to France, you're not going to get those questions asked. You might be asked why you're going there, just for security purposes. But then again, and this was on, I think, a discussion radio show, I think it was LBC a few weeks ago. Then again, if that were the case, if anyone did have suspicions as to your whereabouts, they would have to have a justified reason to know that. Suspicion isn't good enough. That's what I gathered anyway, in terms of what I was hearing. So thank you very much for that, Andy. And you're saying they have brought the licenses, so they legally own some of our fishing. They may have brought them, Chris. But it's a little bit like a lease. And again, this is what you've got to remember. Basically, what they're doing is they're buying a house. They're buying a house. And just for those that are listening at the moment, we're talking about the fisheries. Chris was just saying that they have brought the licenses, so they legally own some of our fishing. Well, on that subject, Chris, although they legally own the fishing, although they legally own the fisheries, you've got to remember it's a little bit like a lease on a flat. Okay, so what will happen is they are purchasing. They don't own the sea. We own our own sea. If the Dutch owned our sea, you know, their navy and everything could basically sail on it, which they wouldn't because we'd tell them where to go. Rightly so, like when the Russians try and invade our airspace, the RAF are very quickly up in the air telling them to sod off. So, you know, basically what would happen is the lease would expire. Just like when you buy a house, you know, if you were to buy a house with a leasehold, the lease would expire, or you would leave the lease, you would sell it on, or you would forgive it. You know, when the lease comes up to an end, or when the lease is coming to an end, you sacrifice what you previously had, and you've either got to renew, or you've either got to rebuy another property or another area. But obviously that won't happen. What we'll be doing is we'll be evicting them. We'll be sending them an eviction notice saying no, 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 bye, 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 bye. Essentially, that's what would happen. So although they legally own the fishery, because they wouldn't be part of our club or part of our union, or because we wouldn't be part of their union, it'd be no more. So thank you very much for that, and thank you. I hope that helped you out, Chris. I hope that gave you some clarity on the whole situation. Just like a Spanish house, you buy it, but you don't own it. That's a very witty comment, Andy. I actually like that one. That's a good one. I like your dry humour there. Britain's coming home. Interesting comments as well, Andy. Oh, forgive me. I do apologise. You can tell this is live TV, can't you? Because I just burped. Pardon me. It was not me. It was my food. It just came up to say hello, and now we're back down below. Anyone ever heard of that one? Thank you very much, Stonkingly Good, for getting in touch. We will look at that comment in just a moment, but we are going to move right on to Chris. We are going down in an ascending order, so if you've got a comment, it's going to be answered. And not a problem, Chris. I'm glad that helped you out. So Chris is now asking, next one, why do Labour insist the maternity rights and labour laws are at risk with a Brexit? Surely these are now part of British law, so will not change. It's treaties, as in bushes. It's treaty, as in bushes. You might have to elaborate on that one. You might have to elaborate on that one, Andy. I didn't. Not Andy, sorry, Chris. I didn't quite get that bit that you just mentioned at the end in brackets. It's treaty, as in bushes. But going on to your question, give you an opportunity to reply to that. Going on to your question about the maternity rights and about labour laws, this isn't just a Labour thing. This is what the Conservatives are also arguing, that if we leave the European Union, everything that we have managed to achieve by remaining within the EU, i.e. the laws that have been made, for example, the Human Rights Act, are suddenly going to disappear overnight. It's absolutely ridiculous. We're going to have up to 2 years after making the decision to leave the European Union to decide what we do, to make a plan. Now, just like when you're coming up to the end of your term at school, or the last term of your school, you know, you make a plan of what you want to do. You go to college, you go to sixth form, you go to university. And that's what we're going to have as a country. We're going to have that moment, that slightly longer period, to really make a plan to leave the European Union. Because, of course, as much as I'd love to leave overnight, it is probably going to take about 12 months after we vote to leave to really bring forward a proposal and draw the motion. So it is going to take some time. But going back to your question, Chris, on EU laws, they're not going to disappear. Because if they did disappear, we'd be going back to the 1800s, you know, the early 19th century. And that's exactly what Labour are trying to accuse the Conservatives of trying to do. That's what they're trying to make out, that the pro-leave campaign, the pro-leave MPs on the Conservative side want to go back to a 1800s, 19th century era. It's absolute codwallop. It really is. It absolutely is. And I'll tell you why, because it's not going to happen. You know, the laws aren't going to change. People are still going to be able to have time off. There are still going to be laws in place to protect part-time workers, maternity rights, and all of that. Because if there wasn't, the economy would collapse overnight. Think of it this way, right? If there were no maternity rights, if all people that were pregnant, if all females were pregnant, or all females that were pregnant had no maternity rights, couldn't have 32 weeks off work, there would be devastating impact on the economy. Because what would be a result of this is females would decide not to work. They'd think, actually, you know what, it's not worth my time. If I've got to have a baby and then work full time without spending any time with them whatsoever, why don't I just do nothing? That's the attitude females will have or could have should their maternity rights be stripped away from them. So the argument that Labour try and make on this whole, your human rights, your personal rights are going to be taken away if we leave the European Union is codswallop. It really is, because if we were to leave the European Union, if anything, our rights would improve, because you know what? We can't decide what wattage our toaster is. We can't decide what wattage our light bulb is. We can't decide what wattage our fridge or hairdryer is, which actually has an impact on our life. We can't control how powerful our cars are or what speed they go at, because you know what? Some unelected bunch of bureaucrats in the European Court I think it's in, I'm not sure where it is, in Brussels, I think it is, decides that for us. I personally think that's an attack on our human rights. The fact that someone who's broken a law in another country can be deported under the European arrest warrant is also against a lot of people's human rights. It's an absolute disgrace, don't you think? Now, that is an attack on people's rights. Maternity rights are a little spot, a little speckle on the whole mess of the situation. So thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming forward with that comment, and I hope that was a very, very passionate speech. In fact, sometimes I do get into my speeches. We've got Dave as well commenting. Hi, Dave. Thank you very much. We are going to be talking to you in just a moment, but thank you very much for that, Chris. Great of you to answer. Anyway, let's have a little look. Let's have a little look at the other comments and see what we've got here. Now, going back to what I was saying about the European arrest warrant, it's a good thing in certain instances. But there are some innocent people that have been locked up in rather disgusting jails that don't apply the Human Rights Act, that are in countries with prisons that you wouldn't want to even stay in for 2 seconds, let alone 3 or 4 months, and that's the biggest problem here. It's not the arrest warrant itself, it's what goes on around that, and that really is more of an attack on human rights, in my opinion. Let's have a little look at what Dave Wellborn is saying. Thank you very much, Dave, for commenting here. You're saying exactly, it is not as if the changes will happen overnight. This is on the subject we're just talking about. Any changes will be phased in as each law is reviewed. It will take several years to repeal any laws. Very, very good comments indeed, Dave. And you continue to say, our Prime Minister cannot decide what the UK benefit system rules are. He has to go and ask permission to change the UK benefit system. Yes, it's just like what Jacob Rees-Mogg said, isn't it? Going around with a begging bowl, asking for gruel, and then getting watered down gruel. Jacob Rees-Mogg summed it up perfectly. And you know what? I get a whiff of that around you, Dave Wellborn. Let me know what you think. Are you a Jacob Rees-Mogg fan? Because that does smell very Jacob Rees-Moggy, and I really like that as well. By the way, I've not actually smelt Jacob Rees-Mogg, but it does. I get a little whiff there. I get a very eccentric, a very intellectual point there from you, Dave. So let me know. Am I right on that? Are you experienced by those comments? It seems as though you know your onions, and it seems as though you've probably forgotten more times about the European Union than I've probably remembered. So interesting comments there, Dave. Absolutely love them as always. Stonkingly good. Let's go straight to you. The UK Bill of Human Rights. Whatever happened to that? The Tories are supposed to have been working on that on the run up to the 2010 general election. Yeah, see, they gave up on that, Stonkingly good. And if you're still in the room, you're more than welcome to reply to this, because it'd be interesting to see what you think. But they actually were working on that, but they gave up on it. You know why? Because those on the left, again, the rowdy left, and yeah, it won't surprise you if I say that it was left-wing university students that think they should have everything free-handed to them on a plate, that actually said, we are not standing for this. We are not having our human rights taken away from us. It's an absolute disgrace. That's sort of what they said. That's the general line of things of what they said. Now, it's interesting. You said it was the UK Bill of Human Rights. It was actually a British Bill of Rights. And essentially, this was intended to replace the European Act, which is of human rights, the European Act of Human Rights, I think it's called. If anyone is in this room right now and fancies doing a Google search for the specific term, then please do so. But I think it's somewhere along the lines of the European Act of Human Rights. And obviously, what the Prime Minister wants to do is introduce a British Bill of Rights, which was opposed by many. But you know what? I think it's sad because if we had a British Bill of Rights, it would at least be something that we could call sovereign. And in a way, I think David Cameron has shot himself in the foot, really, by not introducing it and going ahead with it. Because if he did go ahead with it and we had a British Bill of Rights in place and it was prominently there in the media, it was prominently there in the news, then he would actually have a case to argue that this country was sovereign because he'd be able to use a very practical example of the British Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And I say unfortunately for David Cameron, that's not the case. And again, this is even more of a reason why we need to leave the European Union. Because if we stay in, we're not going to be able to decide. We're not going to be able to decide on anything eventually. Soon, we'll have to press a button, when we get out of bed in the morning and our breakfast is decided, the radio we listen to will be decided. It will be like living in North Korea. There will be state television. The BBC won't even exist. In fact, we'll be remembering the good old times when the BBC was so not impartial. And we'll be looking at the state media thinking, oh my word, what a fantastic day we used to have. And now we're living in a world of dictatorship. Maybe that's going a bit too David Icke, but the way things are going, you could well believe what the likes of David Icke say, about the fact that we are going to be living in a dictatorship type country. But let me know what you think anyway. Yes, yeah, no, it's okay. You didn't get it wrong there, Stonkily Good. But again, that's how the EU brainwash you. They make you think that the UK Bill of Rights is in fact the UK, not the European Union. I'm only kidding with you, Stonkily Good, but thank you for your contribution. Dave Wilborn, in response to my comments on Jacob Rees-Mogg and you being an intellectual political person, if that's what we can call you, Rees-Mogg, I did see his comment in the paper and I agreed with his sentiment. It isn't only the benefit system, the rules apply to many areas of law. Again, you're absolutely right, Dave Wilborn. And you know what? I'm a big fan of Jacob Rees-Mogg, and I'll tell you why. And those of you that don't know him, search him. Jacob Rees-Mogg, that's Jacob, and then it's a double-barreled surname, REES, and then a little hyphen with MOGG. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a very posh man. He talks rather like this, anyone would sort of think that he had a toffee in his mouth, but he doesn't hide the fact that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Very conservative, lives in Somerset. He's a great believer in the local area that he lives in, North Somerset. He's gone so far as trying to even create his own time zone for his constituency. To be precise, 15 minutes ahead of London and the rest of the country, so that when they go to London, they're actually there a little bit earlier than when they arrived or would have arrived from where does he live again? Somerset. It took me a while to remember that. Brain fade, unfortunately. But yes, Jacob Rees-Mogg, very unique character, quite often in the Commons. Definitely worth going to see Jacob Rees-Mogg if he's actually in the House of Commons. If he's in the MP's chamber, then it's always great to listen to him speak. Wonderful, wise man, Jacob Rees-Mogg. And if he's listening to this right now, welcome to the show, Jacob. I doubt he is. He's probably debating some strange thing about the European Union in a dark, dusty room within the House of Commons. Who knows? But anyway, moving on from that and going straight back to the ministers. And as I was saying earlier, before anybody started really getting involved in the discussions, we were talking about the fact that there are ministers that are being banned, the ones that want to support leaving the European Union, they are being banned from being able to use their mandarins, their senior civil servants, also known as, to actually help them in their campaign. They're essentially being gagged. Now, I want to know what you think, because I think this is a very serious problem that we're actually coming across, that we've actually got with regards to this whole European project. Because I think it's atrocious, that ministers are not being allowed whatsoever to campaign against with the help of their mandarins and civil servants. Let me know what you think, but we've got some very interesting comments coming through again. Andy says 75% of UK laws are now controlled by the EU. 40% have already been rewritten. Dave says, we may not have a Bill of Rights, but we have Acts of Parliament and legal rulings from over 1,000 years. So we have an unwritten constitution, but has developed since Magna Carta. Again, very good comments there, Dave. Thank you very much for your contribution. And Andy continues to say they have another 35% that they already have permission to change. This is with regards to the European Union, I gather anyway. Is that what you're trying to say, Andy? 35% of the 40% that have been rewritten can be rewritten again by the European Union, which effectively means by your claims there, we only really have 5% power over our laws. It'll be interesting to look into that further, because honestly, that is a whole other can of worms that we really could discuss on this show right here, right now, live. Oh yes, the EU is full of lots of that. I mean, of course, there are good things for the European Union, but you know what? There are good things in food that we hate. Quite frankly, I hate mushrooms, right? But there are good things in mushrooms. I really dislike the European Union, but there are good things within it. But ultimately, it's all about leaving, because there is so much more bad than there is good. It really is. So let's have a little look. Dave said the civil service cost is being put to the campaign to stay in the European Union. How will the Leave campaign match the effective value? Belgian chocolate, that is pretty good. Oh, brilliant. Dave, going on to your comments about Belgian chocolate. I don't feel, you know what, I'm going to be going to bed tonight. I'm going to sit down. I'm probably going to, read the newspaper or whatever it is that I do. And, and I'm probably going to just see that in the back of my mind, your comment there. Belgian chocolate, yeah, it's pretty good. Oh, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Very witty, Dave. Very witty. Now, how will the Leave campaign match the effective value? Going back to what you were saying a moment ago, how will the Leave campaign match that value? Well, that's why there's a grassroots out campaign called Go. You've probably heard of it if you're a political follower. If you type in Google grassroots out, you will see the campaign. Now, I'm going to be donating £10 to them sometime next week, and I'm hoping to do that once a month because, I'm not a millionaire, but I believe that, I can give a tenner to a campaign that believes in leaving the European Union, and I'm going to be doing that. Grassroots out, I support them all the way. So if you want to help match the effective value of what the Stay In campaign will have, the power that it will have, potentially over the Leave, then it's all about us getting together and standing up and, coughing up just a couple of pounds here or there, once or twice a month, leading up to the campaign in order to help this fantastic campaign that is fighting for the leadership for leaving the European Union. Okay, because we've got leave.eu, we've got grassroots out, we've got lots of different campaigns campaigning to leave the European Union, but we've only really got one that wants to stay in, and that's the big problem. So donating to grassroots out is really going to help group all the other campaigns together. It's the glue that sticks everything together. So, you know, if I was to say one thing, the only thing we can do, we can't speculate, but what we can do is we can, you know, give a little bit to go and support Nigel Farage, support Peter Bone, Kate Hoey in putting forward their case for leaving the European Union. But anyway, thanks for that, Dave. Thank you very much indeed. I will put a link in the description as well to go in just a moment. But first of all, what we are going to do is we're going to go and look at what Andy's saying, because Andy, you really are you really are a man of many dimensions. So there's the link to Grassroots Out. If you want to join the campaign, you can volunteer for them as well. With them, should I say. Andy, you were saying Bill keeps saying trade and things and dependent on being in the EU. They are not. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, Andy. I'm saying actually we can work on our own. We can do that. In fact, I don't think I've said once that that trade are dependent on being in the EU. I've actually said what you are saying, which is they are not. If you want to listen to what I've said on previous shows, you will be more than welcome to do that, and you'll be able to find out more about where I stand on the European Union. Because as you've probably noticed with me, I don't talk about immigration a lot, because I think, you know, that isn't the number one topic. What we need to talk about is more important things. When it comes to immigration, of course it is important, but it's all about democracy for me. It's all about the fact that they have more power, you know, than we can. It's all about sovereignty. So that's what it's all about. You know, I'm not one to just talk about immigration. I leave that to you guys, because you make some interesting points in that area. And again, feel free to do so. Feel free to do so and make some points in that area. Andy, it's not like a lease on a flat. At the moment, the EU decides who fishes where. When we leave the UK, decides who fishes in our waters. Andy, I think you need to replay the discussion, because you're saying that I'm wrong, but I'm actually agreeing with what you're saying. That's exactly what I was saying. It is a lease on a flat. It absolutely is. If it wasn't a lease on a flat, there would be no end to it. I was using a very simple analogy, Andy, to say that by leaving, by these countries, I'm not sure which countries was in the example. It was French, it was the Spanish, and it was the Dutch. Essentially, my analogy was that they all have a lease on a flat. It's an analogy, you know, it's metaphorical, but essentially that's what they have. Now, if we leave the European Union, that lease ends, regardless of what's in the law, because if we leave a club, if we leave what the club is all about, the laws no longer apply to us. The bylaws, as I would like to call them, like when you're part of an association. If you're part of a university association or any other association, there are bylaws. Of course, you know, if you go against those bylaws, you're not going to, you know, the police aren't going to come knocking on your door, because they're club rules, but that's what they're officially called, bylaws. So just like with the European Union, they're bylaws. You know, it's laws within their club that we have to follow in order to be part of their club, or we face penalties. If we leave the European Union, though, although they might have a legally binding contract on using our fishing seas, it will no longer be effective if we leave the European Union. Because if we do that, the UK will then be able to decide who comes into our waters and who doesn't. So please do listen back to it, Andy, because I think you're getting the wrong end of the stick there. I'm actually going with what you're saying, despite your saying or your claims that actually I'm not, or that I'm wrong. Please do elaborate though, okay? If I've got the wrong end of the stick, let me know. But thank you once again for your comments, Andy. Interesting to see your comments. And Chris, CAP is rumoured to cost us about 6.8 billion pounds, and our farmers get back around 3.2 billion in grants. If this is correct, and you may know, why would our farmers not support leaving the European Union? Well, it depends, isn't it? Because of course that's just under half, isn't it? 3.2 billion out of 6.8 billion is just under half. And you know, a lot of farmers, there are a lot of farmers out there that get very big subsidies from the European Union. And that would explain why there is probably more of a tip for those that want to stay in rather than those that want to leave, because of course, 50% or just under 50% of farmers that want to stay in and farmers that want to leave is a hefty amount. And if a lot of people campaign for staying in, they're going to be really passionate, because going back to what I was saying earlier, when you're desperate for something, you shout about it. That those that are going to be losing these subsidies are going to want to stay in, and they're going to be making a lot of noise. Those that don't want to leave are really just jumping on the bandwagon, with regards to the other MPs and the other campaigns like Go. So they're not going to be covered as much in the media for those reasons, because it's already being covered. So that's why it may seem that way. That's my educated guess anyway. Of course, the real answer really isn't there, Chris. But hopefully that's elaborated things for you. It means that staying in is unknown. Look at the video, Britain's Coming Home. Andy, I seem to think, okay, I think I get what you mean now. So I'm assuming you're not arguing with what I'm saying. You're making a very passionate point then. You're making a passionate point of your own. If that's the case, then let me know. If not, you've probably still got the wrong end of the stick, but I doubt you have. Interesting points anyway, Andy. Let's have a little look at what Dave's got. Andy's saying, look at the video, Britain's Coming Home. Interesting. Maybe we could do that. Dave is saying, I found out the other day that beyond the £55 million per day, we provide annually about £2.7 billion in VAT receipts. When did we agree to give a portion of that to the EU? You know what? I don't actually remember, Dave. I can't remember a time being where we agreed to give that amount of money away. And again, this is another example, another great point of yours that proves just how undemocratic the European Union is. It really is, isn't it? And your example there of us giving annually £2.7 billion worth of VAT receipts to the EU is a perfect example of that, when it can't even be, accredited by the accountants in the European Union. It never gets signed off because it's so false. It's such a farce. It's ridiculous. Their spending is absolutely out of hand, and that's why the accountants refuse to sign it off each year. I mean, what's happening with that £2.7 billion? I do not know. Is it being used on deciding what wattage we can use for our light bulbs or toasters? I mean, quite possibly. So Dave continues to say, if we leave the European Union, we will keep our contributions plus the VAT receipt. The government could reduce VAT and stimulate the economy at no cost to them. You're right, and this is it. This is exactly it, Dave. What we've got here is we've got a situation whereby, we are giving billions of pounds a year away to the European Union. And whilst that's happening, we're getting nothing back in return other than maybe £15 million each day, which, when you think about it, is actually a loss. There is no gain, to what we spend and what we get back in. And, to try and argue that we should stay in this club because it's right to is ridiculous. It really is. And we could use that on tackling the housing crisis. If we left the European Union and just focused on fixing the housing crisis, because let's face it, that's the most important problem in our country. If we just pretended that money didn't exist, that we were going to be saving from day one, and used it to build a house, we could build, let's say what we're going to be saving net wise is around 15 million. Well, the average house is about £250,000. So those mathematics out there that can work this out, it would be 4 times 15. Okay, this would be per day. So 4 times 15. Are there any mathematic calculators down there? 4 times 15 is 210. So by the amount of money in net we would save to what we give. So we do get some money back, but the money that we aren't getting back is around 15 million. If we pretended that didn't exist and focused purely on the housing crisis, we could build 210 affordable homes each day. So let's work that out in a month. Let's times it by 31. Let's times that by 12. If the government used that money on the housing crisis, because let's face it, you know, uncontrolled immigration has caused the housing crisis or has contributed to it. Not all of it, but some of it has a big part to play. If we just pretended that money didn't exist, forgetting the VAT receipts as well, just what we contribute, if we were to put that back into the housing crisis, we would build 78,000 homes in a year. That's phenomenal, isn't it? 78,000 affordable homes worth £250,000 each. I mean, just imagine what benefits that would have for this country. Just imagine that. Now, this is exactly what we're looking at here. We are looking at potentially something that could help improve our country. At the moment, there is no money to do that, which is why there's a housing crisis, which is why it's not just all to do with immigration. But because we're part of the European Union, we don't have any spare change. It all gets dumped on the EU, and then, you know, they can decide what light bulbs we use and how many wattages our Hoover is. So that puts it into perspective, doesn't it? 78,000 homes. I mean, everyone knows at least 100 friends. I would say we've all got about 100 friends, you know, roughly. Okay. So that means all of your friends that you know would have a house eventually, would own a house, would be able to have an affordable mortgage. Quite incredible, isn't it, really? So that just puts things into perspective, doesn't it? If we were to leave the European Union, the amount of money we would save, the amount of money equivalent to building 78,000 homes per year. That's quite incredible, isn't it, really? Anyway, let's go on and look at the other comments here. Let's have a little look. What have we got here? What have we got here? Let's have a look at some more comments. Interesting, Andy says bye. I was actually going to kick him out of the room because it seems as though what he's doing is excessively advertising. Now, I don't mind a little bit of advertising, but I don't quite get you, Andy. I think you're a little bit of a weirdo, if I'm honest with you. And I don't care what you say about that. I think actually what you're doing is rather weird. You know, you're coming in, you're saying you agree with me, then you're saying you don't agree with me. Then you're saying your wife has released a leave video and you're telling everyone to watch these other videos. I'm sorry, Andy, but, you know, please do learn some manners. You know, we might agree on the subject of leaving the European Union, but please learn some manners. I don't mind you advertising your case, right? But do it once. You know, don't take the piss. Dave Wellborn, and it is probably more built as cost to actually build more would be less than the selling price. You're absolutely right. So we could actually sell them at wholesale rates. You're absolutely right, Dave. Going back to what we were talking about with regards to the housing crisis. Your sums, I suspect, Chris is saying, 250,000 is $250,000. 15 million would be 60 houses. Hold on a second. Let's do this calculation again, Chris, because maybe my calculator's got it wrong. Let's have a little look. 15 million. Divide, yes, it would be 60 houses per day. So times that by 31 would equal 1,860. It looks like those calculations would be wrong. Yes, thank you very much for pointing that out, Chris. It would actually be 22,000 homes. Thank you for pointing that out, because my calculator, it did sound quite excessive, and I'm glad you realised those sums were a little bit suspect. But nevertheless, 22,320 homes is still an awful lot of homes, isn't it? And that's if we base an affordable home being 250,000. Thank you for pointing that out, Chris. But still, 22,000 homes a year could be built if we left the European Union. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, imagine the homes that live down your road. 100 houses. My word, you know, imagine having 100 homes down your road, or imagine trying to count the homes down your road. It's probably about 100, maybe 150, depending on if you live on an estate or not. Imagine 22,000. It's quite incredible, isn't it? It's quite incredible to put that into perspective, that we could make 22,000 homes. Thank you very much for correcting me there. As I said, you know, I'm always willing to admit when I'm wrong, and you know what, I was wrong there, but you know what? You are absolutely fantastic, Chris, for pointing that problem out. Very vigilant of you. When you're presenting a show, Googling and talking at the same time, honestly, your brain does go into Fazzle mode. But anyhow, that is the last bit of the discussion we are going to have for now. We've spoken about the housing crisis. We have spoken about the fact that there could be more than 22,000 homes being built. We've spoken about the European Union, spoken about the undemocratic elements of the European Union. We've spoken about a lot today, and I've really enjoyed our discussion. Aside from maybe Andy Boylett, Andy sort of, I don't know what was going on with Andy. But then again, let's find out, Andy. I look forward to finding out what was going on there. I found that a rather intriguing experience, but then again, you did have some good points. Although I did find what you were saying at the end there a little bit strange. But regardless of all of that, thank you for your comments, Dave. Thank you very much, Chris, as well. And Stonking as well. Thank you very much, Stonking, as well, for commenting as well. Brilliant comments. Great discussion as always. And you know what, guys? Have a very nice evening. This has been your Sunday night political broadcast with me, Billy. I'll be back next week for another live broadcast to talk about more political matters. In the meantime, though, enjoy the cheesy, inspirational, epic music that's to follow.